Hey everyone, welcome to the Lifeonaire Show, where we believe in building better people, better relationships, better health, better business, better lives, everything being better as a result of being a Lifeonaire. And that's what Lifeonaire is all about, is helping people maximize and live prosperous, abundant lives. I am Jason Wojo. I am joined by my co-host, my cohort, Polish Peter. Welcome, Peter.
Just call me a cohort. I don't know exactly what the word means, but it doesn't sound
It's
so
very
good.
insulting, and you'll have to look it up later. Yeah, so I apologize for that. But see, this is I can use your ESL background to my advantage here. And so,
what are you trying to say?
So hey, listen.
Well,
so
let's keep going.
You guys need to know, like Peter and I are best friends. He's best man at our wedding, and we just rib each other. This is like the dysfunctional kind of like friendship that we have here. So with that being said, here. That's right. That's why we're here. That's why you're listening to us beat up each other. So listen, if you listen to the last episode, we talked about, and if you didn't listen to the last episode, you need to go back. We're covering the 4 stages of financial prosperity, a series of 4 simple yet incredibly powerful steps that my mentor and Peter's coach, Steve Cook, came up with. And we covered the stage 1 in the last one. Stage 1 is the foundation. It's the most important of the 4, so you need to get that one down. So go back and listen if you haven't yet. Now we're moving on to stage 2, which is meeting your needs. This is your financial needs. Now, Peter, have you seen the stats out there recently, how the average person can't even afford a simple transmission if it goes bad in their car without going into debt? Have you seen this stuff?
Oh yes, most people don't even have like few $100s in their bank account to support if
something
were to happen.
They're living completely month to month, right?
Yeah.
And so I'll tell you, I teach some financial coaching at our church, and I see people like just struggling. They're living month to month. And it's not even like necessarily all the time that they're not making a lot of money. Sometimes they make a lot of money, but they spend a lot of money too. And it's like, it's, and I can't tell you the number of times I've heard, and listen, I'll tell you, I'm the first one to admit this. Back in the day, I used to think, oh, if I just made another 50 grand this year, everything would be perfect. I'd be good. I'd be set. Well, let me tell you what's happened. For myself, at least, I'd make more money. I'd spend more money. I made less money. I spent less money. It's like kind of weird. You adjust, like it's like a thermostat or something, like, that wallet warms up when you start getting money in it and you feel the need to spend it. And for me, it took a lot of discipline, and my vision actually helped me quite a bit getting through this stage. But like stage 2 is meeting your needs. And so this is essentially the stage of these 4 stages where you are working, you're trading your time, your life for money. And here's the thing, like if you constantly spend everything you make, you're on this treadmill. And how many people have you heard ever say like, oh, I'm trying to break out of the rat race? Well, that's cool. Except first of all, I don't know if it's ever struck people. Like if you win the rat race, that means you're a rat. Like, have you ever thought of that? Like I think you need to
want to be a rat. Yeah.
Yeah. You need to do a different metaphor here. But we got to get through stage 2. We have to get through this, and you have to get through it like your life depends on it, because quite honestly it does. And so I'm really excited to discuss this in depth with Steve, and we have a really good conversation around how to get out of stage 2. How do you actually start to break free of the day-to-day? How do you start gaining margin in your life so that you're not constantly robbing Peter, no offense, to pay Paul?
What did you say? Rob Peter, pay Paul? Yeah, of course.
Which, by the way, for
See
everyone
what
listening,
I'm talking about here?
Peter's middle name is Paul, by the way, which makes this hilarious.
That's funny, yeah. So listen, guys. No, yeah, I mean, here's one important thing. I don't care if you're making $30,000 a year or you're making $500 million a year. I think this episode is really important for you to listen to, because
crucial.
It's a lot. Yeah, it's has to do with how you are as a person, right? Because like you said earlier, man, you can be making $150,000, but if your expenses are at like $149,000 or $160,000,
right? Like you can make more,
you're still struggling. So this is a really good eye-opening kind of an episode to look at, meeting your needs, because it gives you a lot of different perspective of life. People who actually go through this have some eye-opening ways of looking at life in their own lives, and they alter a lot of their lives based on this particular stage, I think.
Yeah. Yep. So, hey, let's jump right into it. Here's my interview with Steve Cook on stage 2 of the 4 stages of financial prosperity. Stage 2, meeting our needs, right? What does that mean?
Well, bottom line is that's really just the making the money that we need to provide for the lifestyle that we are living. And so, most Americans are living week to week, month to month, just trying to get by. And stage two, in my opinion, if you want to live a prosperous life, is a must win stage. You have to win in stage two in order to be able to experience a life of prosperity. Apart from being able to meet your needs all the time, you're always worrying, you're always grinding, you're always trying to figure out, how do I make more money just to pay the bills? And so as I sit here and I take people through this process of trying to experience this life, it is absolutely critical that they be able to consistently meet their needs. If you're not consistently meeting your needs, you can't think of anything else. It is all consuming. And so we try to give people tips in this area, and it starts with the foundation. It starts with stage one. When we live in a world that is telling us that, hey, having bigger, better, more is the way that life is supposed to be, and that is what defines whether or not you are living successfully, we actually complicate life by pursuing that path. And when I first got started in business, and I should say when I first started having success in business, I had went out and I sought counsel, and I had started saying, okay, I'm starting to really make some good money. What should I do? What should I do with the money that I'm making? I want to do the right thing. And the counsel that I sought, I met with estate planners and accountants and other business owners. And the thing that they told me to do was this: they gave me this big elaborate plan. They were all pretty much on board, telling me to do the same thing. And I went and I followed their plan. I did exactly what they told me to do. And one of the things was, hey, Steve, you're making really good money. Go buy yourself a nice house. Buy a big house. You could use the write-off. And you should start building up some other assets and getting some other things in place. And it wouldn't hurt you to buy a second home also. You could use the write-offs and things like that in the second home. And I went and I did everything that they told me to do, and I bought this big, beautiful house. It was 5,500 square feet on 5 acres in one of Baltimore's nicest neighborhoods. And I was a single guy, but they said, spend about this much. You could use the write-offs. And I ended up having a beautiful mountaintop vacation home in the mountains of North Carolina. I ended up putting together a large rental portfolio. I did all the things that they told me to do. And their plan worked out beautifully, because in a little over 3 years, I went from really having no assets to over $7 million in assets in just over 3 years. The problem, and I say the problem, was here I am going down this path, and I'm doing all the things right and doing it exactly the way that I was supposed to do it. And I started realizing that I wasn't happy. And I kept wondering, when was I going to be successful? Because everybody around me thinks I'm successful. And I know that, okay, I got the big house right now. It's beautiful. It's jaw dropping. People will turn the corner and be like, wow, that's his house. And, it was, sort of just a house that came with a big payment to me. To make a long story short, life got very complicated. Trying to take care of all of that was consuming. I had to work additional hours. I was constantly doing things. And now I did it. I made a lot of money. I had to make a lot of money in order to be able to live and experience that lifestyle. But what had taken place was, for me, I was very fortunate that a few years earlier, before I had all of that, when I first sat down to meet with all of these guys, my recent past was I had just come out of a failed restaurant business, and I had lost everything. I didn't have anything. I had to live extremely simply. My lifestyle at that time was based off of about $2,000 a month, because that was all that I had. And then I started making really good money, and life was awesome. And then I went and I did all the right things, quote unquote, the right things that I was told to do. And then all of a sudden, life got very complicated. I had the nicest of all things. I had everything from cars to vacation houses to nice houses to, could go on trips and things like that. But then all of a sudden, life was not good anymore. What happened was this: the vision that those guys painted for my life was a complicated one. I allowed somebody else to tell me what my life should look like. And I played by the rules. I did what they told me to do. They told me I would be successful. And really, their vision for my life was that I should accumulate assets and wealth. And that was the goal of life as far as they were concerned. When the reality of the situation was, the reason I got into business in the first place was I wanted to be free. And this lifestyle that I created actually robbed me of my freedom. It took it away from me. And so what I came to realize, that I was prosperous when life was simple. And then life became complicated, and that prosperity seemed to go away. It was elusive. And so I came up with the term prosperity through simplicity, that I came to realize that it was a whole lot easier for me to be prosperous when my life was simple. Once I did all the things that the world told me to do and these professionals told me to do, life looked good. Their plan worked, but their plan did not take into consideration that I wanted to be free, that I wanted to have this great life. There was the presumption or the assumption that if I did enough of that, one day I would be free to do the things that I wanted to do. But here's the problem. I was free when I started the process.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up giving up that freedom. I ended up working a whole lot more. I ended up creating a lot more stress in my life. I ended up having much more to take care of and much more to manage. I made good money, but the problem was I created a lifestyle that forced me to make that good money week after week, month after month, year after year. And the prospect of that, the lifestyle I was creating was going to take 30 years to pay off. And that was tiring to think about it, that it was going to be 30 years before I would be free from that hard work, that constant grind. And I knew that there had to be a simpler way, because just a few years earlier, it was simpler and life did feel good. And I did have freedom and I could do whatever I wanted to do. And I came to realize that this chasm that I was creating from where I was to now what the world says was success was when I didn't feel successful. And I looked back when I didn't have what the world said I was supposed to have. That's when I felt successful.
The irony there, right? Like, what struck me is that you were basically listening to people that had never taken the time to create vision for the visions for themselves. Because if they had, they would have probably would have realized this one size prescription does not fit all, and that to suit the needs of any particular client, you need to find out what that person really, really wants. Yet, how many of us are doing that, right? We are not, and this isn't just, we're talking about finances now, but how many of us are taking relationship advice from somebody who's been divorced 3 times and is on their 4th marriage? And, so finding qualified people that have gone through this process it's not easy, for one, to find those people, but it's incredibly important.
But so here's the thing that is also important to take note of, is the people who I went to were very qualified to advise me to do the things that they told me to do. Their plan worked. Their plan worked beautifully, but they believed that life was all about the accumulation of wealth. And that's the American dream. That's the culture that we live in. It's to accumulate more. It is not about being free. We live in the land of the free, but that's not what we focus on. We end up focusing on building a lifestyle, and it's really a lifestyle that's designed to impress other people, to say, hey, listen, I'm playing this game well. But at the end of the day, we sacrifice the things that we say we're doing it for in order to have it. And so it took me recognizing that what I really wanted was freedom to live and experience life and to experience relationships. And the people who I was going to for advice, their idea of success was to accumulate much and build a substantial net worth, which was different than what I really wanted. Not to say that I didn't want that, but what was really important to me was my life, and I didn't want to sacrifice my life and my relationships to have that. So I set out to figure out how to have both.
Do you think that's a hang up for a lot of people? They believe you have to choose one versus the other?
Oh, there's no question about it. I think it's a hang up. I remember, I will say this. It is imperative that if you do want life, that you do have to choose that. That's not going to come accidentally. You do need to be intentional about that. But that doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice pursuing wealth at the same time. But if you say, hey, I'm going to put my focus, my energy toward wealth, I promise you, you will sacrifice in the life area, and to the point where you might lose everything that's important to you.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, like if you don't focus on life and you only focus on money, you'll definitely sacrifice life. But if you prioritize life and make that important part of your vision, you don't necessarily have to sacrifice the money. Is that true?
That is 100% true. Yes.
Okay. So you mentioned, stage 2 is meeting your needs. And you also mentioned the phrase prosperity through simplicity. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that means?
So to maybe give a visual picture of that, I've shared with you about the group of people who I came together with and who they developed this plan for me. Well, that was in 2001 when I got together with them. And I shared with you that my needs were only about $2,000 a month at that time. So $24,000, $25,000 a year was all I needed to get by and live a comfortable life. It wasn't, certainly I wasn't living a wealthy life, but my needs were met with $25,000 a year, my basic needs. In 2001, that was sort of my breakout year. I made $40,000 in the month of January. So I want you to just think about that for a moment. It didn't even take me 3 weeks to meet my needs for the whole year. And because my needs were so simple, my needs for the entire year were met in only 3 weeks. It was very, very easy for me to get by with the success that I was having.
Yeah, wow.
Well, then I got counsel. I did everything that they told me to do. I played by all of the rules. And a few years later, I have all of these assets. But the same $25,000 that would get me through a whole year in 2001 would get me through 2 weeks in 2004. And so when I sit here and I talk about prosperity through simplicity, it was easy for me to be prosperous in 2001. It was a lot more complicated to be prosperous in 2004. The same effort that would get me through a year in 2001 would only get me through 2 weeks in 2004. And I was doing everything that I was supposed to do. And so I did it. I was able to do it, but the pressure and the stress of having to perform at that level week after week, month after month was tiresome. And knowing that I had to perform at that level for many years to come before I would get back to where I was in 2001, where I was free and that my needs weren't much, that was just a tiresome prospect, and it really drains you, and it really takes away from the things that you want in life.
I can't even imagine going through that process of that, like such a simple life and that much of a financial need to fast forward basically 3 years, it sounds like, where that same amount of money used to get you a year, essentially now is like, you have to double that every month just to break even. Was this like a creep thing? Did it happen gradually, or did it, and did you even realize this was happening until you woke up one day and you're like, whoa, like what has happened here?
That's a good question. I've never even contemplated that before. Was it a creep? Did it creep up on me? I'm going to say yes, it did. I was moving so fast with the plan that they gave me and executing and taking action and doing all of those things. To go from zero in assets to over 7 million in 3 years. I had a lot going on, but I believed that everything I was doing was right, and there was a part of it that was fun. And and I enjoyed doing it, but the part that I enjoyed, as I can look back on that, was the belief that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. They told me that this is the right thing to do. It's working. I'm getting more and more successful. And then all of a sudden I wasn't feeling it, and I was feeling the pressure, and I was feeling the stress, and my relationship with my wife was being compromised, and my relationship with my children were being compromised. And then I was honest. I was with myself one day to say, wait a minute, this isn't what I wanted. I wanted something so much more. I wanted great relationships here, but now I don't have great relationships. I wanted time for them. Now I don't have that time. And I have all of this other stuff, and this was supposed to give me that, and it's not. What's wrong? And, so I was honest. I challenged myself with that question. And that's where, Lifeonaire and the whole 4 stages to financial prosperity was developed, was through that season of my life.
So, what I love here is this was actually built through real life experience, not this isn't some theoretical armchair expert thinking of some intellectual exercise. This is you had to figure this out, right?
It was 100% was me figuring it out, and to just sort of even put many others at ease that, yes, this was something I did for myself. I did it in my own life, but here's the real testimony is I have coached hundreds of other people through this process, through our events and through other coaches. We have changed the hearts and lives of thousands of people who have been through this process. And it is, at the end of the day, it's a simple process. The question is, do you have the guts, the courage, the boldness to actually go through it and to go against what the world is telling you to do? And if you are that kind of person who says, hey, yes, I really want life, I want to embrace, this vision thing and to develop, change the rules and to live by that, and so that I can live and experience a great life. This is actually just a process that once you apply it, it will change everybody's lives. And it has worked over and over and over again, not just for me, but it was developed from my own personal experiences. And we have shared that now with many others who are also experiencing it. But, it really boils down to, does the person have the guts to say, here is what I want. I don't care what the rest of the world says. I'm going after it. And
Yeah.
we have watched it just incredibly change people's lives. And so
I want to hear how this played out for you. We're still at the point of needing that much money every 2 weeks. I want to hear the rest of it. But one question surfaced for me that I'm wondering if our listeners are asking themselves right now is like, okay, how simple do I have to get? And is it a have to, or is it like, so are we asking people to live in a van down by the river and eat ramen noodles and mac and cheese? Or what does that look like for people? Like, and we all have intuitively heard, spend less than you make, but this is more than that. And so what is your recommendation for people?
Well, at the end of the day, that's up for everyone to decide for themselves. Again, they have had people who have written the vision for their lives for all too long. I'm not here to tell anybody how they should live.
Okay.
My goal is to help them to come to that conclusion for themselves and to decide what it is that they want. And then our goal then is, from that point, is to help them to develop a plan to help make that happen. Now, we make suggestions and I share my story, and people can take whatever it is that they want to take from my story. But to your point, when I got to that point and I'm sitting here and I have over $7 million in assets and doing all these things right, there was one day when I woke up. It's in the middle of the night, I can't sleep. And the thing that I'm thinking about is all of the money and debt that I owed, and I sat here and I'm every single day, night trying to fall asleep. I'm calculating in my head, where is my debt right now? How can I get it paid off? And how can I, what can I do? And I kept thinking maybe I need to do some bigger types of transactions and things like that will generate more money so I can eliminate the debt more quickly. And, one night I'm sitting there and I'm adding up my debt in my head. This is all trying to go to sleep.
Yeah, good time for it, right? That's how your mind works.
And I realized then, okay, well, my 7 million plus in assets came with $4.5 million in debt. And that $4.5 million in debt was the thing that was controlling me. That $4.5 million in debt is what kept me up at night. That's what created stress. That's what made me work so much. The obligations that I had made to those lenders was the thing that controlled me. I was a slave to those lenders. I could sit here and say, hey, listen, I mastered my money. I knew what I was doing. I was playing by all the rules. I was doing it the right way. But the reality of the situation was they controlled my thoughts. They controlled how I slept. They controlled my stress levels. They controlled my relationship with my wife. They controlled whether or not I enjoyed my vacations, because it was all consuming. And so at the end of the day, I was told that was a good thing to do. And when I came to recognize how much it controlled me and my life, I came to realize it was a bad thing, because there wasn't any good coming from it. It allowed me to own a lot of stuff, but the reality was it owned me. And, so I oftentimes tell people, hey, look, there's nothing wrong with owning stuff. There's nothing wrong with owning a lot of things, but there is something wrong when it owns you. And in this particular case, my business and all my investments and all the things I was putting together and all the stuff that I had, I didn't own it. It owned me. It controlled me. It mastered me. It told me what to do.
Big difference.
And, yes. So I made up my mind that one night when I couldn't sleep and I sat there and was totaling up all of my debt in my head, that I was going to get out of debt. And I was going to do everything I could to bring that number down to zero, because it was only a few short years earlier when I had no debt and I felt more free than I had ever felt in my entire life. I didn't have a whole lot of stuff. I didn't have a lot of assets. I had a great income. My needs were easy to meet, but I also was completely free. If I did make, $20, $30, $40,000, I got to do whatever I wanted to do with that money. Fast forward a few years later, I can make $50,000 and it got me through a month. That was it. And I had to go off and do that all over again. If I made $100,000, it would only get me through 2 months. So I made up my mind that I wanted to be free of that. And I decided that I was going to become debt free, that I was no longer going to borrow. And that was a scary proposition because my entire business was predicated on my ability to borrow at that time. So I decided to change gears and not listen to what everybody else told me, to not listen to what the accountants and the estate planners and the other business owners were telling me, to not listen to what my peers were telling me, but to say, you know what, this is the life that I want, and I want to be free. And I'm going to do whatever it is I have to do to get that freedom. And so for me, some people would have considered what I did to be radical. For me, everything was on the table. I was willing to liquidate everything I had. I was going to take every single nickel I owned and just plow it toward debt. My goal was to get to zero. And the way that I saw it was, even if I was losing money on something that I was selling, that I was buying my life back, because every single time I could eliminate some of that debt, I realized I was getting a little bit more of my life back. And so my goal was to get that to a zero as fast as I could. And so you're asking, what are we asking people to do?
I have a cliffhanger here. So I want to hear from you. What did you actually do? What did you do? Did you start selling stuff? Did you start downsizing? What happened? Tell everyone's, I'm on the edge of my seat right now.
Yeah, I decided to downsize my lifestyle if that's what it took. I sold the big house. I was willing to sell everything. But this is what I was willing to do it all for. I knew that when I could get my debt back to zero, I could now rebuild my life the way I wanted it to be.
Okay, fresh start.
I could now have the vision that I wanted, the knowledge and everything. You couldn't take that away from me. I had the knowledge. I knew how to make money. That wasn't a problem. What I needed now was to do it in such a way that contributed to the life I wanted to live, not take away from that life. And so everything was on the table. It took me just short of 4 years to be able to eliminate all of that debt. At the end of the day, when all of that debt was gone, almost all of the assets were gone as well. Not entirely. I still had some assets, but I had eliminated almost all of that. And again, my goal was to get to zero. And I didn't care what that took, because I saw it as buying my life back, which was the most important thing to me. It was the reason why I got into business in the first place. And ultimately, it was the thing that I most desired to have. So I was going after that. I was willing to let go and sacrifice money. When I work with people who are so trying to hold on to that money, they just defer life and defer life and defer life. And the thought of possibly losing money is very painful to them. They're not willing to take those steps. And I took a completely different approach. Was I can get the money back. I can't get my life back. The more life I give up in pursuit of this stuff with money, or the more of my life that I lose to serving money and being mastered by it, that's something I can never get back again. But I can go out and make money again. That's
okay.
easy to do. So it was a mindset change for me.
So I was going to say, what was that like? Both from an internal perspective as well as an external perspective? Like, what did people say about this? They must have witnessed this, and it must have been like what did they think?
So I got to tell you, at first, the things that I was thinking is, what are people going to think? What are they going to think as I make this decision to go down that path? And that's when I found, said, you know what? It's not their life. I shouldn't care what they think. It's my life. And I want this freedom. I want to be a great husband. I want to be a great father. And I'm going to do whatever it is that I have to do. I'm going to man up. I'm going to let my actions reflect my words. This is going to be what's most important to me. And I'm going to do what it is that I need to do. Now, then I went out and I did start sharing it with people, and they thought I was crazy. The things that I thought that they would think of me, they did think. And
You're right.
tell me that I was crazy, I was wrong, and and that went on for a while. Literally, there were some people who just stopped talking to me.
Wow.
Rumors started flying. People said that I was going under with my business, and it couldn't have been any further from the truth. But those same people, many of those people who told me that I was crazy, and there weren't too many people who were on my side at that time. The most, I can only think of like one or two who were saying, yeah, okay, that sounds good, I get it. But almost everyone was telling me that I was wrong, I was crazy. And but within a couple of years, many of those people started coming around and saying, hey, Steve, let's talk about that stuff that you were trying to tell me 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I want to know, your life looks a whole lot different for you now, and I want the same thing.
So, along those lines, like, so now that you've perfected these 4 stages, I'm sure there's always tweaks and modifications, but you've add this. I want to take you back to that stage where you're going through this for the very first time. This hasn't been proven before you. You didn't have a track record of success that you've seen 100 other people go through this. Did you have any doubts that this would work, or did you knew this was going to work? Did you have unshakable faith in that, or were you kind of like, what was that like?
I knew it was going to work.
Okay.
It did. But I also knew that the world around me was constantly bombarding me with a different message. And so, yes, I would hear the other messages sometimes, and sometimes question whether or not I was wrong. But I was like, no, I already know that they're wrong. I've already experienced it. I know that their way doesn't work. And what I want, this is the way to get it. I know that in order for me to live and experience an abundant life, I can't listen to them. I have to be really careful. And now, having said that, I didn't have anyone. There wasn't anyone that was around me that was doing this. There wasn't somebody else I could go to. There wasn't somebody else that could coach me or mentor me or guide me through that process, because most people I talked to were actually telling me that I was wrong. And so I actually decided to start up my own coaching group to bring, and one of my primary reasons for doing that was, and my selfish reason for doing it was so that I could surround myself with other people that were also pursuing it. And I knew that if I was coaching them, I had to do it also. And so, secondary reason was I wanted to help them. But my first reason, selfish one, because I needed that accountability myself, and I needed to surround myself with others who were on that same thing. And so that's an extremely important thing to do, is to surround yourself with like-minded people. And most of the time in the world, people were telling me that I was wrong and that I shouldn't be doing it, and all the opportunities I was missing out on. And, today my life is so much different. I was willing to do for a short period of time what none of them were ever willing to do. And consequently, I can do with the rest of my life what none of them can do today. And so because I was willing to make those sacrifices and really pursue the life that I desired, we have so much freedom to do the things that we want to do and experience today. My kids have done more than most adults who are already at the age of retirement have done with their lives. And, my kids have been to more countries and have traveled the world in a way that most people never get to do. And, for me, it was important that I wanted to be able to even do that with my kids. But we were very intentional about creating such a lifestyle to be able to do that. And I will just throw this out there that a lot of people would say that, well, Steve, you can do that because you have a lot of money. And that's not true. That's not the reason why we can do it. We can do it because that's the way we structured our life. We structured our life to be able to do that. And before anybody even goes down this path, there's people who say, well, Steve, you were able to pay off all that debt because you make a lot of money, or, you have no, this is what I'm frequently told today. You have no debt because you have a lot of money. And I say, no, I have a lot of money because I have no debt.
Boom.
I get to keep the money that I make. When I had debt, I didn't have a lot of money. I had a lot of money that went through my hands, but it went out as quickly as it came in. And, but today I get to keep what I make.
I got to tell you, Steve, I can really relate to that because I had a point where I had not the same amount of debt as you, had about $650,000 of debt, but about 90,000, just around, I don't remember the exact number, it was somewhere around $90,000 of credit card debt. And I remember I'd make money literally the next day. It was gone. It was gone because I was paying all the bills. And I'd be left, and I'd try and squeeze, a month on like $500 or something or whatever it was. And the first time that I got rid of that debt, and I had no longer had the credit card debt and those things, it felt super weird. Like I was like, okay, what am I forgetting to pay right now? This is bizarre. And it for me, it was a super bizarre experience, like very, very strange until I got used to it. And then I'm like, I don't ever want to experience that again. Like I'm like super paranoid to even like go down that road anymore. So I can relate to that totally.
You are somebody who played the game well.
Right.
I remember the conversation with you after you had paid off your debt, and you called me and you said, Steve, it feels so weird.
I almost couldn't even enjoy it. I was just like, what?
Money. And I was like, I'm saving money like there's no tomorrow right now. And this is weird.
And, and so what was strange though, is because I got my first credit card in college, right? Because my parents thought I had to have a credit card to build my credit. Right. And we'll talk about debt a little bit more, but it took me that long to get out of debt. Like I'm talking from, I don't know, what was I, 20 years old when I got a credit card, whatever. Like, so decades to get out of debt. It was just such a bizarre feeling. I want to talk more about debt in a second though. But one thing you said that I want to make sure everyone grasped, we're talking about stage 2. You mentioned it being temporary. Like we're not supposed to stay in stage 2, right? And yet,
no, I think that on a certain level, we always stay in stage 2. I still consider myself to be in stage 2, but what the key is, I have to win in that stage, and I have to do well in that stage so that I can participate in the other stages.
Okay.
So once you can consistently meet your needs in stage 2, and if you can keep your life simple, it's easy to win in stage 2. If you choose to live a complicated life, if you choose to buy expensive cars and finance them, and buy an expensive house with a big mortgage payment, and to finance everything that you ever do, you're going to complicate stage 2. Getting to the point where you can ever really become wealthy is going to be a different story. So if I keep stage 2 simple, I win in that stage quickly and can proceed to stage 3.
Okay.
And then stage 3 is where I make excess.
Okay.
And so now that excess is something that I can begin to do more things with.
So most people though, you'd say don't ever get to stage 3 because they are consistently, spending what they make, or sometimes they even spend more than they make. It's like, this is where I feel like there's a number, we could talk about strategy and tools, but ultimately there's a lot of discipline that needs to be involved here, where, because I remember, when I was flipping houses, you make that big paycheck and then all of a sudden you have, your Ruth's Chris appetite versus McDonald's when you have no money. And so you just spend whatever you make. And this is where I think of a lot of people being stuck like on the treadmill of life. I don't remember the exact number, something like I remember hearing a statistic that the average person can't afford to pay for $1,500 expense cash out of pocket without putting it on a credit card. And so this is where it seems like people, through complexity, through financing their life, and giving that to lenders, giving that flexibility and freedom to the lenders, we get on this treadmill. Now, yeah, admittedly, some of us have diamond encrusted, gold plated treadmills, which represents a very complex lifestyle. But now we have to work to maintain that. And now if you're constantly in this battle, trying to stay afloat, trying to tread water, making and spending, you can't get to stage 3. And that's where I think the majority of people get stuck. Why do you think people get stuck there so often? Like, why do people not just get ahead? Like, what is it? What's keeping people there?
Because they're just playing by the rules.
Okay.
You know, they're living life as the American culture says that they should live it. You get a raise at work, you buy a bigger house or a nicer car, and so you spend everything. And believe me, that is what our culture wants you to do. I mean, that America thrives on you being a spender. They thrive on your ability to be able to borrow to spend more, and so it's heavily encouraged. And all that does is complicate your lifestyle, rob you of the freedom that you really desire to have. And, one day, you're doing everything right and you wake up, you're wondering, where did my life go? Mm-hmm. And you find yourself that, on Monday morning, you're not getting up to go to work because you love to work. You're getting up and you're going to work every Monday morning and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday because you promised the lenders that you would, that you now have that obligation to them. You owe it to them. They're the ones who are actually mastering your life. And that's why when, if you were to lose your job, you're scared to death because they're going to come down on you for having lost your job. And you don't know how you're going to meet your obligation to them. But when you don't have that and you don't owe anybody anything, it doesn't bother you so badly when one thing doesn't work out.
One thing that struck me as we're talking here is if you've skipped stage 1, creating your Lifeonaire Vision, most likely you're living a life that isn't yours, right? And so therefore you're probably not as happy and fulfilled and peaceful as you normally would be. And so one way that people deal with that is by buying stuff, right? They're trying to fill this need because they're unhappy with their life, which does what? It just snowballs this entire process. And now your stage 2 needs continue to grow and grow and grow. And it's because you've never taken the time to create your vision. And now you buy your happiness through the accumulation of material possessions.
You're feeding right into the marketers, the marketers then say, hey, life's not what you want it to be. Buy this and it will be better, or drive this car and everyone will look at you and be like, ooh, but the reality of the situation is that is somebody else who's trying to tell you what your life should look like, where when you sit down and you come up with the rules and you write your vision, you can ignore all of those messages and just pursue the one that you've designed.
Well, and one other thing I've heard you say in the past that's super relevant here, you've said to the question of like, oh, so I'm supposed to just like live like a monk and deny myself all this stuff. I've heard you say, you're not denying yourself anything. You're simply prioritizing what's most important to you and realizing that some of this other stuff that you've cluttered your life with is taking that away from you. So you're not denying at all. You're prioritizing. Is that still true?
Yeah, and I say I'm not asking anybody to deny themselves things. I'm asking you to embrace life. And once you embrace life and you realize that life is what it is that you really want, you're willing to defer some of those things for a while, but the decision becomes yours. Most of the time, what people don't realize is they, do not defer some things where they have to have this now. They're making a sacrifice for it. They are sacrificing their life in order to have something. I had a student who one time, she wanted a Mercedes SUV. And I was asking her, well, what do you want the Mercedes SUV for? Why can't you get something different that costs less? And she said, well, because it's the safest vehicle there is out there. So I want to back up just a little bit. She was working a job so that she could pay for the Mercedes SUV and the insurance. And her husband told her she had to get the job. Well, the reason she wanted the Mercedes SUV, this was her reasoning, and this is going back to what you said earlier, how we'll use our families and our children as scapegoats. She said that I want it because it's the safest vehicle on the road, and I want that to be the vehicle that my daughter rides around in. And I did a quick Consumer Reports search, and I found out that the Honda Pilot was the safest SUV at the time. And I said, well, I have great news for you. And she was like, oh, no. The reality was she wanted the Mercedes. So She said she was doing it for her daughter. Well, now in addition to being able to make the payments on the Mercedes SUV and paying for the insurance, she had to pay for daycare for her daughter to be there while she went to work. So here she says she's doing this for her daughter. So then she now buys the Mercedes SUV so she can drive her daughter to daycare in the safest, quote unquote, safest vehicle, and then drop her daughter off so she can go to work for 8 hours to make enough money to pay to have her daughter at daycare, to pay for the vehicle that she's going to drive around in, and to pay for the insurance on that vehicle and the gas, and then pick her daughter up at the end of the day. And the reality is that she had a clear picture of what it was that she really wanted. And I'm not trying to take anything away and say that she didn't love her daughter. She was being challenged by a message that the world gives her that says, if you really love your daughter, you would put her in the safest vehicle. And they sold her well on that. But if she took the time to really think through that and what it was she really wanted, she would have been home with her daughter instead of dropping her off somewhere else for someone else to raise her, while she could go work for a job so she could pay for somebody else to take care of her, pay for the vehicle that she drove her there and picked her up in, pay for the insurance. And so when you begin to look at it from that perspective, the irony of it all is, why didn't you just stay home with your daughter? And you know what? There was a safer vehicle that cost half the money, but you allowed your own emotions and desires that they said you'll really look good in the Mercedes to take over. And so those are the kinds of things that we can buy into. And when you come up with that clear vision that I want to be the mother, I want to be the one who takes care of my daughter, I want my daughter brought up in this way, and here's the values that I want my daughter to be taught, you say, well, in order for that to happen, I can't go and buy that Mercedes, because this is what's really important to me. And if I buy that Mercedes, it will compromise what it is that I really desire to have for my daughter.
Do you run into that a lot? And do you feel like people are truthful with themselves sometimes about what they really want? Like, so for instance, in this case, this woman, either one, she really, really, really did want to be there for her daughter. And that was absolutely indisputable. And yet she struggled with the external side of validation and approval. Or is it possible that sometimes people say what they think is the noble thing? Like they think they're supposed to want this, or this is looked on as being noble. I'll give you an example. Like I remember teaching one of our 3 days, and one of the Get a Life Getaway, and a woman stands up in the middle of the event, and she says, we had just done the vision building exercise, and she had done some homework overnight, and she came to the realization, woman's in her late 40s. First time in her life, she realized she didn't want kids. Her entire life, she had told everybody she wants kids. Now, she had no kids, okay? She had no kids. She had something going on physiologically that prevented her from having kids. And here was a woman who has really struggling with this. She was angry. She was bitter. She was negative. She was taking it out on the world around her because, she felt like she was supposed to be a mother. When she did the exercise, she realized that she said this. She's like, I don't even really like kids. And everybody laughs. But at the same time, I'm like, here's a woman who had spent her whole life letting other people tell her that, what kind of woman, well, the implied message was, what kind of woman wouldn't want to be a mom? Like, what's wrong with you? And so she had in her mind created, like, I need to be this person, yet she was struggling with it because she couldn't have kids and she couldn't afford to adopt. And so here she spends decades of her life with this false belief of what she should have. And so I'm wondering, in your case, how do you tease this apart for people, and how can they tease it apart, or can they? I mean, it seems pretty hard to do. And, this woman had to come to our Get a Life Getaway to make this realization, but how do you really tease apart what somebody really wants, I guess, because that's what it comes down to? Or how do you help people dissociate from this constant external pressure of like, this is the way you should do things?
But this is exactly why we have people write their own vision for their life, because the world around them says something different. The world around this woman said, if you love your child, you would not put them in an inferior vehicle. She was letting somebody else write the vision for her life. There's no question about it. She loved her daughter. She cared for her daughter. She wanted to protect her daughter, and the world around her plays on those emotions. But she didn't know what it actually meant to love her daughter, to care for her daughter, and to protect her daughter. She was letting the world around her tell her what that meant. had she ever taken the time, which most people never do, they never plan, what does it mean for me to be a good parent? What does that look like? What does, what's my vision for being a parent? Instead, when we don't do that, then the world tells us what a good parent is. And the world is going to say, spend your money with me, and then you're a good parent. So this is where my point is, going back to the embracing life. Had she had a vision of, I want to be a good mother. Okay, well, what does that mean to you? What does being a good mother mean? And the conclusion that she eventually came to was, I really want to be home with my mother. I really want to be home with my daughter. I don't want somebody else raising my daughter. But when she pursued what the world's definition of being a good parent and loving your children was, well, if you love your child, you would not drive her in any vehicle less than this. And consequently, now that you have to go to work to pay for that vehicle, if you would really love your daughter, you wouldn't have her in any daycare center other than this one. And, and so now the one who she is doing it for is now being raised by somebody else, spending all her time with somebody else. And this woman wasn't getting ahead. Every nickel she made was going to pay for daycare, the SUV, and the insurance and the gas. She had nothing extra after that. She wasn't contributing to the household. The whole purpose behind that was to, for the one who she loved. If she had a clear vision of what she wanted, she would have embraced that and said, I love my daughter. I want to be the one to raise my daughter. I want to be with my daughter. And it doesn't make sense for me to go buy that vehicle, which is now going to force me to put her into daycare, take her away from me 40 hours a week. She's the one I love. She's the one I'm doing it for. I might as well be there with her. I can drive a cheaper vehicle and, not let the world say that if you loved your daughter, you wouldn't put her in anything less than this. So when I say it's about embrace life, but you got to know what life is. Embrace life. And to say that the most noble thing is to be willing to say no to some other things in order to take hold of what you really feel is the most important thing to you.
Got it. That makes a tremendous amount of sense. Is this a good time in stage 2 to talk about debt and how this can keep us in stage 2?
Well, I can just tell a quick story and we'll make our point about this real quickly. One of the things that I share this story over and over again, and it's about a mortgage. And the reason why I use a mortgage as the example is because we live in a world that says there's good debt and there's bad debt. And one of the good debts would be to buy real estate. That's everything that you could ever read on the topic of debt would suggest that using a mortgage to purchase real estate is good debt. Now, with that in mind, most people are, because they're smart and they want to do the right things, those who are really working hard to play the game well are willing to take on good debt because it's good, quote unquote good. And so when they want to buy a house, and if they don't have the cash to purchase the home, the first thing that they do is they go to a lender to see if they can get the money. And so the conversation goes something like this. It's, Mr. Lender, I found the house that I would like to purchase. However, I can't afford to purchase it. I was wondering if you would be willing to put the money up for me so that I could purchase that house and live in it. And the lender says, you know what, go ahead, fill out this paperwork, and then we'll go ahead and we'll check you out. You fill out all the paperwork, you provide them with everything it is that they're looking for. And if everything looks good, they say, you know what, everything here looks pretty good. You look like you'll be a pretty good servant. We'll go ahead and we'll put the money up for you. And so you actually show up at a settlement table with a title company or an attorney, and you're going to start filling out all the paperwork to purchase this home. And what those documents really say in plain English is this. There's many pages, but it says this in a nutshell. If you are willing to serve the lender with 25 to 40% of your working hours for the next 30 years of your life, they will allow you to peaceably enjoy that home. If at any point over the course of the next 30 years you fail to faithfully serve that lender, they can throw you out of the house and sell it to somebody else. After 30 years of faithful service, of giving of your time, they'll let you keep the house. And so basically what that boils down to is 25 to 40% of your working hours, or 25 to 40% of the income that you make, is what you are promising to the lender for the next 30 years of your life. So you have to understand this. The moment you sign those documents, you just gave up 25 to 40% of the money you promised it for the next 30 years. You gave up 25 to 40% of the time that you work for the next 30 years to this lender. You promised them that you will continue to do this for the next 30 years. And I want you to now think about this for a moment. You take 25 to 40% of the hours that you work every week, and you've already promised it to a lender. You add in cars, potentially 2 car payments, or at least 1 car payment. You're now giving up another 10 to 20% of your hours that you're working for the next 5, 6, 7 years. You're now adding some credit cards and everything else. Before long, by the time they take taxes and everything else out, there's nothing left. You are not going to work because you want to. You are going to work because you promised somebody you would. You promised the lenders that you would. And if you don't work 40 hours and you're only working 30, you're not generating enough. And so this is where people are starting to work extra, or taking on part-time jobs, or trying to do other things on the side, because they have basically promised their futures away. And if you go back to what we talked about with prosperity, what is it that we really want? We want freedom. We can't possibly have freedom when we have promised our lives away for years to come to somebody else. And this is where people are missing out. And so the number one thing that we talk about as far as prosperity through simplicity, that our number one thing that we recommend, we don't tell everybody you have to do this, but we want people to have an understanding of debt. And most people, once they clearly understand what debt is doing to them and how it controls their life, that in order for me to have something today, I have to promise away my future for years to come, they start to make the decision that maybe I want to be debt free. And if I have to go into debt to have something, maybe it's not that important, because that's me sacrificing my life. That's me giving up my life so that I can have this today. And so I was sharing this exact same story just recently, a few weeks back, and there was a banker in the room, and the banker was getting really upset when I'm sharing this story. In fact, he was starting to huff and said where he was starting to talk over me. And I'm sitting here doing a presentation to a room of people, but he's starting to talk over me. And he says, that is wrong. And he says, it is stupid to pay rent. And it is, that is foolish. And people should be getting mortgages. And then all I did, and I just said, you know what? You're right. You are absolutely right. I said, if the goal of life is to accumulate the most stuff, and to accumulate as much wealth, or to accumulate as many assets as we can, then I would probably agree with you. I said, but if the goal of my life is to be free and to have the time to do the things that I want to do and not to be a slave to other things, then just maybe being debt free and not having a mortgage is the better path to go. And then he shut up. He couldn't respond to that.
Yeah.
Nothing more for him to say. But that is the initial reaction that people have, because we live in a world or a culture that says it's foolish to do anything other than that, and you're stupid if you do anything other than that. And again, if the goal of life is to accumulate the most, then that is true. But,
so man, I'll tell you, I remember hearing that. I remember hearing that for the first time. And for those of you who that's new to, go back and rewind this and listen to that again, because it's incredibly powerful. And if you're wondering where those numbers come from, the 25 to 40% is your front end ratio. That's how much of your income that a banker or lender will typically approve you for your mortgage. 30 years is a typical term of a mortgage. And so I just really want to highlight that. So here we are giving away whatever and let's even break it down to the day. So you're or the week, so out of a 5-day week, you are giving 1 to 2 days a week of your 5-day work week just to your mortgage, right? Or you could break this down to the day and you're giving up, who knows, till lunchtime just to pay your mortgage. And now you add in all the other bills, all the other debts, and you can quickly see where this is why some people can't quit their job, is because they've created a lifestyle that demands this and depends on it. I saw a great quote, Steve, recently. It said, instead of working so hard to make ends meet, consider having less ends. and it fits perfectly into this. It's fantastic. And the other thing I want to say is that if you're in this situation, it's going to take maybe a little bit of a slow unwinding of whatever situation you're in, but it all still starts with that vision, and it still starts with creating what you want life to look like. And so it's very, very powerful, and this is why so many people get stuck here. And like Steve said, like, and good debt, by the way, let me tell you good debt, like that quote unquote good debt is only good while it works. And very quickly can become non-good debt when it doesn't work. And depending on when you're listening to this right now, we're in a situation right now nationwide where people with debt are struggling. They're really, really struggling because they have limited ways to make an income, and they're seeing how this relationship between the lender and the borrower is really that of servanthood, and people are living this.
Whenever somebody tells me that they're not mastered by the lender, I just tell them to miss a couple of payments and they'll find out who their master is.
Right. Awesome. So that's awesome, Steve. Thank you. Is there anything else in stage 2 that we want to highlight, or you did a pretty good job there?
I think we covered that in pretty good detail.
All right. Stage 2, there it is. Hey man, wow, that was cool. I'll tell you, I enjoyed that conversation with Steve, but also this is, to me, it's my least favorite of the 4 stages, because this is where you're basically treading water, right? And we see people, like we talked about earlier, after treading water for an amount of time, what do? You start getting tired, right? And you start sinking. Mm-hmm. You got to start swimming for shore. And so this is where I want you to get off the treadmill of life, and I want you to start looking at your expenses. And, one of the questions that I had to ask myself back in the day was like, what am I willing to cut, and how can I make more money? And ideally, you can do both of those, and you should do both if you can. And so I had to look at like, what are the expenses here? How do I simplify, reduce my overhead so that I can get past stage 2? And now, of course, I'll always have stage 2 needs. I'll always have my needs, but the simpler I can make things, the easier it is. And we know this intuitively, right?
Right.
How many times have you heard spend less than you make? But so few people do it.
Yeah, I get it, man, because even when I was going through this, one of the things that was happening for me, I think for a lot of people is doing this. Oh man, I got to cut this. And then I don't know if I want to cut this. I want to get rid of this, or whatever the case may be. But here's the thing. And it's the reason why stage 1, having this vision, is so important, because guess what? As you're looking at your expenses right now, whether or not you want to cut something, and you look at your vision that you have in front of you, and you start, what? I want to have that more, that this temporary, cut on my expenses.
Well, dude, I think that what you said is super powerful. It's really weighing what's most important to you.
Yep.
It's not like, so, and we're not asking you to live on Kraft mac and cheese and ramen noodles like forever, right? But if there are places in your life where you can simplify, and you can maybe for you, you can identify the negotiables versus the non-negotiables. So like, maybe that Starbucks every morning, maybe you can go. Maybe you say, heck no, I'm keeping the Starbucks no matter what. Mm-hmm. Okay, there's no right or wrong. It's up to you. But the quicker you can decide how motivated you are towards living this vision and how important this vision thing is to you, that'll help you guide yourself in the process of what you're willing to do.
All right. So a takeaway from this particular episode I have is like you said, looking at your vision, looking at your current situation, yourself how long you've been living like stage 2, right? Kind of teetering over, or whether or not making more money or not, and expenses and all that kind of stuff. How much longer do you want to live that way? So that vision is going to pull you to like, listen, this is more important. I want to live this vision. I want to get to it as fast as possible. And just consider the stage 2 is a temporary thing. It's meant to be temporary. So go start looking at your life and, have conversation with your significant other, if it's somebody that you have like that in your life, and start taking action, because guess what? That's when things are going to start moving in that direction of the vision that you want to live. So start taking action and go after it.
And unless you create that margin, you're always just going to break even. You're always going to break even. And the thing is with breaking even, you're never really breaking even, because sometimes all it takes is one little nudge from life and you're in the red. Right. And so you really gotta watch this and try to move into the next stages, which is what we're going to actually, by the way, cover in the next section of the next episode we have. And so to wrap things up, so far in the last episode, we covered stage 1. In this episode, we covered stage 2. We're going to move forward to stage 3 and stage 4. Before we move forward, I would like to remind you, if you haven't done the Lifeonaire Vision building stuff yet, go over to the Lifeonaire app. You can download it from the Apple iTunes store or the Android store. Is there a name for the Android store, by the way? Do they have a name? Do they have a cool name?
I don't know. I'm an Apple guy.
Yeah, me too. I feel really, I'm not the right person to comment here.
Yeah.
So you'll have to look that up.
It's the other people. Right.
Yeah. Right. Or you can download the desktop version from lifeonaire.com. And so check that out. There's a bunch of free vision building resources, tools, and all that kind of stuff. It's great. We'd love to hear from you. Either go over onto our Facebook page and leave a comment for us. And we are going to do viewer and audience questions. We'd love to take those from you. And please leave us a review. That would be awesome. In the wherever you find your where do people leave reviews, Peter? Like, I don't even know. Like
on iTunes or on the Android store. Just where you're at, where you live. Just leave a comment there.
Yeah, leave a comment anywhere you want. Like you want to put this like on a whiteboard somewhere. Cool. You want to put it like don't put any comments on bathroom stalls. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for comments that will help people understand how good this is.
Just make sure you tell how great Polish Peter is and his accent and all that kind of stuff. So that's all.
All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in. It's a pleasure for us, and we will see you in the next episode.